So good morning. Welcome back to Breakfast with the Bible. I did have a different message intended for today, but I felt for some reason to kind of keep on track with what I had last week. So I'll probably post the one I had for today up at a different time. So if you saw the thumbnail, you can probably gather what we're going to be talking about, and I'd say most of us are pretty familiar with the story. So King Nebuchadnezzar had a golden statue made that was huge, right? It doesn't appear in Scripture, to my knowledge, what exactly that statue was, but we know it was large, it was gold, and it was something Nebuchadnezzar wanted everybody to bow down and worship. Many speculations on what it might be, but for this message, it's really irrelevant. So, in an episode of VeggieTales, it was a giant chocolate bunny, but I'm pretty sure that's not scripturally accurate. So this king, again, he made it a law that when the music plays, that everyone should stop what they're doing and bow down and worship this golden image. Whatever they were doing, wherever they were at, stop what you're doing and now kneel and bow and worship this golden thing. So there were three young men in the story, and again, most of us are familiar with. I'm not going to be talking about Daniel specifically, but it is in the book of Daniel. But these were very likely teenage boys, probably 15 or so. They were Hebrew. Their names were Hananiah, which means Jehovah has been gracious, Mishael, which means God is without equal, and Azariah, which means the Lord is my helper. So the king decides to change the names of these guys to Shadrach, which means inspiration of the sun, S-U-N, Meshach, which means belonging to Aku, this is a pagan god, and Abednego, which means servant of Nebo, which is another pagan god that Nebuchadnezzar would worship. So their real names reflected their godly heritage. In their day, and beyond that point, names were much more important, I think, than they appear to be now. It defined them. It told of what kind of person they would be. Throughout Scripture, names really kind of explained what kind of person they were. So when the king changed their names, he was in effect eliminating their reference to God, erasing their past, or at the very least eliminating it from the topic of conversation. The king renames them to be to the point to where every time their names were called, it was a reference to his pagan gods. And one commentator wrote, it's an example of attempting brainwashing. It sounds awfully familiar to me. This whole culture is trying to rename everything. God says they were created male and female. Now culture says it's anything you want it to be. We're no longer referred as being created in the image of God, but instead we are the image of what we want to create. Culture says if we take what's true and redefine it, then anything can be true. The passages I'm going to read come out of the book of Daniel, and I'll begin with reading in chapter 3, but before I do that, I want to draw our attention to something I noticed in chapter 1. If we look at Daniel chapter 1, verse 17, it reads, "As for these young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. God gave them a specific level of wisdom and understanding that would apply directly to what they were going to face. When we need wisdom, God will provide it in direct correlation to what we are facing or what we will face. He doesn't give us wisdom for that we don't need at the moment. So now one thing I believe is clearly seen today among a lot of mainstream churches is wisdom. I think it's lacking for sure. Wisdom to see what kinds of times we're in, wisdom to see what it's important to focus on, and wisdom really to how to stand in the face of opposition. There's plenty of opposition, and I think wisdom is definitely lacking in that area. James 1:15 says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally without reproach, and it shall be given him. God says, if you need wisdom, it's here for you. King Solomon asked for wisdom, and he was known as the wisest man to ever live. right? So we would see and believe that wisdom these men had is not something that isn't available to us who request it. The problem is I believe most are satisfied or even proud of their so-called wisdom, and they never appeal to God for His. I can handle this myself. I can figure this out. I can whatever, and God's wisdom isn't necessary because I'm intellectual. I'm whatever you want to call it. We're so proud in our own understanding that we forget to ask God for His. That being said, let's go to our main passage, starting in Daniel chapter 3. I'm going to start at verse 12 and read to verse 18. So there are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is an associate or a soldier of some kind speaking to even a council speaking to King Nebuchadnezzar. He says, these men have not regarded thee, O king. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye not worship, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and if you will, deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image that thou hast set up. Now we don't see a large statue, at least not yet anyway, that we are told to worship. But what the world and our country specifically is trying to do is change our names to hide our past, remove our heritage, cause us to be a reference to a pagan god. They want to make us into whatever they see fit, and they want us to worship and even celebrate their ideals. So there is and always has been this proverbial they. And while we don't know who they are, rest assured they do. Okay, there's always a they in quotation. And we may not know exactly who it is. But like I said, they know who they are. So what must we do as believers is ask God for wisdom. Look at verses. I'm going to start back at verse 16. It says, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. Or better said, we have no need to return a word to you. Or we don't owe you an explanation. So before I read 17 and 18, let's turn to Acts chapter 5 for just a moment, beginning in verse 27. This is when Peter and the apostles were arrested for preaching and teaching. So verse 27 says, And when they had brought them, they set them before the council, and the high priest asked them, saying, Did not we straitly command you that you should not teach in this name, referring to teaching in Jesus' name? And behold, ye have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine, and intended to bring this man's blood upon us. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, We ought to obey God rather than men. Peter is saying, my obedience to God supersedes any obligation I have to answer you. And if you will expect me to obey you when your command is going to go against my God, the commands my God has given me, you'll lose every time. So this is the same thing Shadrach and the guys said, okay? So going back to Daniel chapter 3, picking up at verse 17, they say, If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king, but if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So, do what you will with us. Our God is able to save us from this furnace. But even if he chooses not to, we will not bow. They didn't care what the outcome was going to be. They knew they wouldn't bow. It doesn't matter what you do, O king. We're not going to do it. So, better to burn here for a moment than to deny God and burn forever, right? So I also want to point out one thing that I noticed is the tone of their response. Twice they said, "O King." This was in reverence and respect to his position. I believe that while standing firm, they didn't say it snarky. They didn't say it in this demeaning, rude kind of way. They were still respecting his position as king, and they responded respectfully. This is, be it known unto thee, O King. With all due respect, I'm not going to do it. This was not a self-righteous, proud answer, but their convictions were sincere. They truly trusted God and would not bow. So it's, again, you're king. I get it. You are ruler of this land, whatever. But again, with all due respect, we will not submit to your rules because my God and his rules supersede yours. So what are you going to do when that day comes? When you're faced with that kind of choice, what are you going to do? You're going to remain steadfast and accept the fiery furnace, or are you going to warm yourself by the fire and deny Christ? Right, that's a reference to Peter and his denial. Are you going to stand there comfortable and deny him, or are you going to accept the furnace if that be the case? We are in a day when our commitment to God and his sovereignty is being and will be challenged. When a society is so set on removing our past, our heritage, and our God, we will be left with a choice. Conform in order to stay comfortable, or hold the truth and endure the consequences, whatever they might be. Philippians 1:20-21 says, "According to my earnest expectation and my hope, that nothing I shall be ashamed, but that with all boldness as always, so now also Christ shall be magnified in my body, whether it be by life or by death. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Again, Hebrews 13:6 says, "So that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me." What's man going to do, right? After being condemned to death, St. Ignatius of Antioch said this shortly before being devoured by lions. Listen to this. "Allow me to become food for the wild beasts, through whose means it will be granted me to reach God. I am the wheat of God, and am ground by the teeth of the wild beasts, that I may be found the pure bread of Christ." If being devoured by lions is what God has set before me, so be it. Basically, as long as I stand firm in my faith, as long as you stand firm in your faith in Jesus Christ, the end result is a win-win. Think about it. I stand and live, or I stand and die. Both are desired outcomes in a sense, because from the absence of the body is present with the Lord. The very worst man can do to me is take my life. And that doesn't belong to me anyway. And if man takes my life, God has allowed it. And I'm with him forever regardless. So why would I cower in the face of opposition? There's no good reason. Think about it. It's going to come down to those who will stand and those who will bow, and it's closer than you think. Look around. We may not know exactly what's ahead, but no matter what it is, our God is able, and even if he doesn't save us, we will not bow. Erwin Lutzer wrote a book called "We Will Not Be Silenced." It's very recent. It's a very good book. I'm going to add a link to the description so you can access that book. But it's along the same lines as, do what you will, but we will not be silenced. We will not bow to your ideals. We will not bow to your whatever you lay before us. If it doesn't come from God, I don't want any part of it. Okay, it's not going to get my worship. So what will you do when that day comes? So where will your trust be? Government? Not likely. Healthcare? Not so much. Google? I mean, there's so many things begging for your attention, begging for your worship. It takes a discerning heart, discerning mind to really look around and go, no, I'm not bound to that one. So, will you trust God, is what I'm asking, the creator of the universe? Because rest assured, you will meet him one day, and you will bow to Christ one day, either by choice or by force. Which one are you going to prefer? Okay, I choose to do it willingly. Okay, I pray you choose Christ as well. Again, I'm going to add that link to the description for Dr. Erwin Lutzer's book, and I'm also going to add a link to a message by Pastor J.D. Greer regarding the book of Daniel. I think it's a good accompaniment to this message. But again, think about it. These three boys, these young men, were faced with bow to my statue and live freely. You'll be, everything will be fine. You'll go about your day, or suffer a fiery furnace. Now, most of us know the end result. They went to the fiery furnace and they weren't burned. They didn't smell like burn, the fire or smoke or anything like that. And then King Nebuchadnezzar noticed a fourth person in the fire, walking around with their chains and their bonds gone, walking around freely, and they come out, and so the story goes. Those stories may not always end that way. When we face the fiery furnace, we may end up, burning in that fiery furnace, metaphorically or even literally. Who knows? But the point is everywhere we look, we're faced with these options to choose. Bow to this, bow to that, worship this or worship that. I've erected this giant statue, this monument, this image, this whatever it is, and I want you to bow to it. Okay, that's what society's saying. I've given this idea, I've given this redefining of truth, and I think you should bow to our new ideals. And if you don't, then we'll do what we see fit. So again, I pray this message has touched your heart. I pray it's challenged you. Again, I don't know when the next one's going to come out, the one I already recorded, but it's along the lines of just trusting God through hard times. I think it's probably relevant for the time, but really I wanted to kind of tag to the last message I did, really to look around and see that it's not getting easier in a sense. Christians are going to be faced with choices. You can look around and see various choices being made, some to demise, some to glory, but it's going to be up to you. Again, I thank you for watching. I hope you continue to watch, and I hope it blesses you. Thank you, and God bless.